All right, we're going to talk about a word that sounds pretty complicated, Chorio amnionitis. But don't worry, we're going to break it all down. We're going to trace how this one condition can set off a whole chain reaction, kind of like a ripple in a pond, creating a series of critical events for both a mother and her child. So, what exactly is chorioamnionitis? Well, put simply, it's an infection that happens inside the uterus during pregnancy. It affects the very environment where the baby is developing. And this infection, that's our starting point. It's the first domino that's about to fall. Exactly. This is way more than just a single isolated infection. It's all about that ripple effect. We're going to follow those ripples as they spread out, starting with the pregnancy itself, and then moving on to the health of the newborn. Okay, so let's jump into that first ripple, the immediate impact this has on the pregnancy. And let me tell you, it can be pretty significant. This is where it gets really interesting because the infection plays two different roles. On one hand, it can be a direct cause of prematurity, meaning it can literally trigger labor to start way too early. On the other hand, it's a huge risk factor for something called PPROM, which is when the amniotic sac breaks before it's supposed to. So you see, it can either cause an early birth directly or can create the conditions that make it much more likely to happen. So that brings up a really important question, right? If that protective barrier breaks too early, what's the game plan? How do medical teams get in there and manage that suddenly huge risk of infection? Well, the response is actually pretty logical. Once pre-prom happens, that risk of infection skyrockets. So to fight back, antibiotics are often given to the mother. And the main goal here isn't just about treatment, it's about prevention. It's about protecting the baby from getting an infection after they're born. So let's move on to that next ripple, because even with all those preventative steps, the original infection can still pose some direct risks to the baby once they're born. After birth, a newborn might face complications that you can trace right back to that initial infection. The two big ones that the sources point to are a higher risk for pneumonia in newborns and also a really serious condition called early onset group B strep or GBS infection for short. But hang on, because this is where the details get super specific and they paint a much clearer picture of the danger. It's not just about having chorioamnionitis by itself. There's another factor that can come into play and just completely raise the stakes. So check this out. You have the initial condition, the chorioamnionitis, but when you combine it with the mother developing a fever over 38 degrees Celsius during labor, the risk of her baby getting that GBS infection goes up a lot. This specific combination is a major red flag for medical teams. It just goes to show how different factors can pile on top of each other to create a much more serious situation. Okay, let's zoom out and connect all these dots now. We've seen how one thing leads to another, and it creates this really clear, almost predictable pattern of potential risk. This quote just nails it. It really is a chain of risk. Think about it. We started with just one infection. That led to risks for the pregnancy, like prematurity. That, in turn, created risks for the newborn, like pneumonia and GBS, which then got amplified by other things like a fever. You see? It's a perfect chain reaction. And that's why mapping all this out is so incredibly important. When you understand every single link in that chain, healthcare providers can start to anticipate what's coming, they can intervene, and they can manage the risks so much better. Knowing how the dominoes fall is the key to stopping them. It really makes you think, doesn't it? Beyond just this medical example, how does understanding that first domino in any situation, whether it's your health, your finances, whatever, how does that help us prepare for everything that might come next? That's a powerful thought to end on.